After 40 years of being sealed shut, the deadly underwater caves beneath Santa Rosa Blue Hole were finally reopened in 2016. Two expert divers with decades of experience descended into the labyrinth that had claimed lives before. But when Shane Thompson took a wrong turn in the murky darkness, he found himself trapped in an unmapped dead end with no way out. 20 years of diving expertise meant nothing as panic set in, and the same underwater tomb that had killed two students in 1976 prepared to claim another victim. Deep in the heart of New Mexico lies a natural wonder that draws visitors from around the world. The Santa Rosa Blue Hole appears as a perfect circle of crystal clear water, stretching down 80 feet into the earth. Fed by underground springs, this geological marvel maintains a constant temperature of 62 degrees year-round. The water is so clear that sunlight penetrates to the very bottom, creating an almost magical underwater landscape. For recreational divers and swimming enthusiasts, the Blue Hole represents paradise. Families come to swim in its refreshing waters during hot summer days. Diving instructors bring students here to practice their skills in the safe, controlled environment. The visibility is exceptional, making it an ideal training ground for new divers learning to navigate underwater. But beneath this peaceful surface lies a secret that most visitors never know exists. Hidden under the sandy floor at the bottom of the Blue Hole is an entrance to something far more sinister. A complex network of underwater caves stretches deep into the earth, creating a maze of narrow passages, tight restrictions, and dead ends that challenge even the most experienced cave divers. The history of these caves is written in tragedy. In March of 1976, two university students on a routine diving class decided to explore beyond their training limits. They entered the cave system during what should have been a simple practice dive. Hours passed as their instructor waited at the surface, growing increasingly worried. Search teams were called in, but the narrow, twisted passages made rescue efforts nearly impossible. It took weeks of dangerous searching before both bodies were finally recovered. The incident shocked the diving community and local authorities. The caves had claimed two lives, and officials decided that no one else should risk the same fate. The Army Corps of Engineers was called in to permanently seal the entrance. Tons of rocks and debris were dumped into the cave opening, and a heavy metal grate was installed to ensure no curious diver could ever enter again. For 4 decades, the caves remained sealed and forgotten. The Blue Hole continued to serve as a popular diving and swimming destination, but the deadly passages below were locked away from human access. Stories of the caves became local legend, whispered among diving enthusiasts who wondered what mysteries lay hidden in the darkness. In 2013, everything changed. The ADM Exploration Foundation, a group dedicated to scientific cave exploration, petitioned authorities to reopen the sealed caves. They argued that modern technology, better equipment, and highly trained expert divers could safely map the system. After years of legal processes and safety reviews, permission was finally granted. The excavation process alone took several years. Decades of accumulated sediment, rocks, and debris had to be carefully removed from the entrance. Engineers and divers worked together to create safe access while maintaining the structural integrity of the cave system. By early 2016, the passage was finally clear and ready for exploration. A team of 10 expert cave divers was assembled for the mapping mission. These weren't ordinary recreational divers or weekend enthusiasts. Each team member had decades of experience in the most challenging underwater environments. They had explored caves around the world, mapped uncharted systems, and helped develop modern cave diving safety protocols. Among this elite group were two standout divers who would lead the most dangerous portions of the exploration. Both men had spent their careers pushing the boundaries of what was possible in underwater cave systems. They had trained together, dived together, and trusted each other completely. Their combined experience totaled more than 40 years of technical diving in the most challenging conditions imaginable. The mapping mission was planned to last 3 days in late March 2016. The team would systematically explore and document every accessible passage, creating detailed maps for future scientific study. Advanced diving equipment, including rebreather systems and high-tech cameras, would capture every detail of the previously unseen cave network. The first 2 days of exploration revealed why the caves had been so deadly in 1976. Instead of the large open chambers that recreational divers might expect, the system was a chaotic jumble of massive boulders. Car-sized rocks created a 3-dimensional maze with only narrow channels carved between them. The passages twisted and turned unpredictably, with multiple dead ends and confusing branch passages. At 120 feet deep, a massive column of boulders rose from the cave floor like an underwater mountain. There was no safe pathway through or around it for recreational divers. The realization was both disappointing and valuable. This cave system would never be suitable for public access, but the scientific mapping would prevent future tragedies. On the final day of the expedition, March 26th, the plan was straightforward. The team would complete their mapping by exploring the deepest accessible sections of the cave. The route would take them through a tight restriction at 140 feet depth, then down to an even tighter squeeze at 165 feet. The diving plan called for only one diver to pass through the second restriction, while his partner waited in the relatively open area above. This was standard safety protocol for technical cave diving. Never leave your partner completely alone, but don't expose both divers to the same extreme risk simultaneously. The lead diver would be using a side-mounted rebreather system, which offered several advantages in tight spaces. Unlike traditional scuba tanks worn on the back, side-mounted equipment could be positioned and repositioned as needed while squeezing through narrow openings. The rebreather technology would also extend bottom time significantly by recycling exhaled air and scrubbing carbon dioxide. His diving partner carried a camera to document this final exploration. They had worked together seamlessly over the previous days, establishing clear communication signals and emergency procedures. Both men knew that cave diving left no room for improvisation or mistakes. Every move had to be calculated and deliberate. The descent began normally as they followed the guideline that had been carefully installed during previous dives. The line served as their lifeline to the surface, providing both navigation and a psychological connection to safety. In zero visibility conditions, this thin rope becomes a diver's entire world. At 140 feet, they reached the first major restriction. The opening was barely large enough for a single diver wearing full equipment. The lead diver squeezed through first, carefully maneuvering his side-mounted tanks through the narrow passage. His partner remained on the safe side, watching through the clear water as his teammate disappeared into the restriction. The plan was working perfectly until something unexpected happened. Instead of waiting in the designated safety position, the second diver made a split-second decision that would change everything. Perhaps curiosity got the better of him, or maybe he wanted to capture better footage of the exploration. Whatever the reason, he decided to follow his partner through the restriction. This seemingly small deviation from the plan set in motion a chain of events that would test every aspect of their training and experience. The second diver was using back-mounted rebreather equipment, which created different challenges when navigating tight spaces. What had been manageable for side-mounted gear became significantly more difficult with equipment mounted on the back. As he squeezed through the restriction, his back-mounted rebreather began catching on overhead rocks. The passage that had seemed navigable suddenly became a trap. Each movement forward only wedged him more tightly between the unforgiving stone walls. The water around him began to cloud with disturbed sediment, reducing visibility to zero. Panic is the deadliest enemy of any cave diver. Years of training focus on maintaining calm, controlled breathing, and systematic problem-solving under stress. But the human body's survival instincts don't always listen to rational training. When trapped in a dark, narrow space deep underground, even experienced divers can fall victim to the overwhelming urge to escape at any cost. The trapped diver's breathing became rapid and shallow as claustrophobia set in. In a rebreather system, this creates a dangerous cycle. Fast breathing can overwhelm the carbon dioxide scrubbing system, potentially leading to toxic gas buildup. The equipment that was designed to keep him alive was now struggling to process his panicked breathing pattern. Meanwhile, his partner had continued deeper into the cave system, unaware that anything was wrong. He was following the established protocol, trusting that his teammate was safely positioned at the agreed-upon waiting point. It wasn't until he felt unusual movement on the guideline that he realized something had gone wrong. Cave diving communication relies heavily on rope signals and physical contact. In zero visibility conditions, a gentle tug on the guideline can convey important information between divers. But the signals the lead diver was feeling didn't match any of their established communications. The line was moving erratically, suggesting his partner was in distress. The decision to turn back and investigate meant abandoning his own planned exploration. But cave diving partnerships are built on absolute trust and mutual support. The lead diver began retracing his path through the narrow passages, following the guideline back toward where he expected to find his partner. What he discovered was far worse than he had imagined. His partner was wedged tightly in the restriction, no longer able to move forward or backward. The disturbed sediment had created a cloud of silt that made visual contact nearly impossible. Worse yet, the trapped diver was showing clear signs of panic, the one condition that kills more cave divers than any equipment failure or navigation error. The rescue attempt began immediately, but the narrow confines of the passage made it extremely difficult. There was barely room for one diver, let alone two people trying to work together to solve a complex problem. Every movement risked disturbing more sediment, further reducing the already limited visibility. The trapped diver's panic was escalating despite his partner's presence. His movements became more frantic and less coordinated. In his desperation to escape, he began making the situation worse by wedging himself even more tightly between the rocks. His back-mounted rebreather was now completely stuck, and his thrashing movements were causing damage to critical life support equipment. During the struggle to free his trapped partner, the lead diver experienced his own close call. The violent movements and desperate grabbing caused him to lose his grip on the guideline, their only navigation reference in the silted-out cave. For several terrifying moments, he was completely disoriented in the maze of rocks, unable to see anything and unsure which direction led to safety. Through systematic searching and incredible luck, he managed to relocate the guideline and re-establish his connection to the outside world. But precious time had been lost, and his partner's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The trapped diver had now been struggling for many minutes, consuming his limited air supply at an alarming rate. A breakthrough seemed to come when the two divers managed to partially free the trapped equipment. Working together, they were able to adjust the position of the back-mounted rebreather just enough to allow limited movement. It appeared that the worst was over, and both divers would be able to make their way safely to the surface. But the ordeal was far from finished. As they attempted to navigate back through the cave system, the emotional and physical stress of the incident continued to take its toll. The previously calm, controlled dive had become a fight for survival, and the psychological impact was affecting both divers' decision-making abilities. The disturbed sediment throughout the cave created navigation challenges they hadn't faced during their planned exploration. Familiar passages now looked completely different in the cloudy water. Reference points that had been clearly visible during the descent were now hidden in the murky environment. Communication between the divers became increasingly difficult as stress levels remained high. The careful, methodical pace of technical cave diving was replaced by urgent movements and reactive decisions. Each new obstacle seemed to compound the problems they were already facing. The guideline, which should have provided clear direction to safety, became a source of additional confusion. In the chaos of the rescue attempt and subsequent navigation through silted passages, the line had become tangled and displaced from its original path. What should have been a straightforward exit was turning into another navigation puzzle. As they worked their way through successive restrictions, the psychological pressure continued to mount. Every narrow passage became a potential trap, every turn in the line a possible wrong direction. The confidence and systematic approach that had carried them safely through hundreds of previous dives was being tested by circumstances beyond their normal experience. The trapped diver, despite being freed from his initial predicament, was still showing signs of significant stress. His breathing remained elevated, and his movements lacked the smooth control that characterizes experienced technical divers. The rebreather system, which had been partially damaged during the entrapment, was struggling to keep up with his oxygen demands. In an attempt to ensure adequate air supply, he switched to his emergency bailout system, a traditional open-circuit scuba tank designed for exactly this type of emergency. This backup system provided a limited but reliable air source, free from the complexity and potential problems of the rebreather technology. However, the bailout system came with its own constraints. Unlike the rebreather, which could theoretically provide air for many hours, the emergency tank contained only enough compressed air for a short period of use. This created a new time pressure that added to the stress of an already difficult situation. As they continued through the cave system, both divers were fighting against the effects of prolonged stress and physical exertion. The human body isn't designed for the sustained adrenaline and cortisol levels that come with life-threatening situations. Even highly trained individuals can experience decreased coordination, impaired judgment, and reduced problem-solving ability under extreme stress. The navigation challenges continued as they worked their way through passages that should have been familiar from their earlier dives. The disturbed sediment had transformed the underwater landscape into an alien environment where normal reference points were hidden or completely obscured. Each restriction they encountered required careful negotiation, made more difficult by damaged equipment and elevated stress levels. The systematic, methodical approach that characterizes safe cave diving was being challenged by the urgent need to reach the surface before emergency air supplies were exhausted. The cave system, with its maze of boulders and narrow passages, seemed to resist their every attempt to escape. Passages that had been navigable during the calm descent now appeared more threatening and difficult. The psychological impact of the earlier entrapment was affecting their perception of even routine cave diving maneuvers. As they approached what should have been one of the final restrictions before reaching safer, more open areas of the cave, the cumulative stress of the entire incident reached a critical point. Physical exhaustion, emotional strain, and equipment problems had created a perfect storm of challenging conditions. The restriction ahead looked similar to many they had already passed through, but the context was completely different. What might have been a routine squeeze during a normal dive had become another potential trap in a series of life-threatening situations. The approach to this obstacle would test everything they had learned about cave diving safety and survival. Both divers knew that they were running out of time and options. The emergency air supply wouldn't last much longer, and they were still far from the safety of the surface. Every decision from this point forward would have potentially fatal consequences, and there would be no opportunity for mistakes or second chances. The water temperature at these depths was a constant 52 degrees, cold enough to quickly drain body heat and affect mental clarity. As they moved through the murky water, Shane made a deadly mistake. He couldn't see clearly because of all the dirt in the water, so he took a wrong turn into a passage that had never been explored before. Mike watched as his partner disappeared into what was actually a dead end. The narrow tunnel got tighter and tighter. Shane quickly realized he was trapped with no way out and no room to turn around. This area had never been mapped by anyone. Fear took over completely. Shane started breathing fast and panicking, which made his equipment stop working properly. He fought desperately against the rock walls, but this only made him more stuck. Mike tried to save him, swimming through the cloudy water to help. But the space was too tight, and Shane was too panicked for any rescue to work. After 20 years of diving experience, Shane Thompson died the same way as the two students who had died there 40 years before, trapped forever in the dark caves under Santa Rosa Blue Hole. If you want to learn more about recognizing dangerous behavior and understanding the warning signs that can keep you and others safe in high-risk situations, make sure to follow our content for more awareness about crime and tragedy in our society.